The tissue paper crinkled between my fingers as I unwrapped what should have been the most generous gift in wedding history. $3 million in the deed to an oceanfront mansion. Instead, I was standing by a bathroom wall at my son's reception, banished there, because my 64-year-old face might contaminate their Instagram photos. The gift box sat heavy in my hands, silver ribbon catching the country club's chandelier light. Around me, 200 guests clinked champagne flutes and posed for pictures that would never include me. The mother of the groom relegated to the shadows because apparently love has an expiration date, and mine had passed somewhere between raising David alone and watching him marry a woman who saw dollar signs where others saw family. My name is Martha Williams, and 36 years ago, I held my newborn son for the first time, promising him everything. Last week, I kept that promise. This week, I discovered promises don't guarantee gratitude. The reception hall buzzed with celebration, while I stood frozen against the wallpapered wall, watching my daughter-in-law adjust her veil with manicured fingers that had never scrubbed floors to pay for someone else's college tuition. Brittany Peterson Williams, marketing executive, perfect teeth, perfect smile, perfectly calculated cruelty, wrapped in wedding white. Martha, could you just stand over there by the bathroom wall? Her voice had carried that sweet venom I'd learned to recognize over the past year. The photographer wants family shots, but with your age and everything, we're keeping the photos young and fresh for social media. The champagne in my stomach turned acidic. Around our table, conversation died. Mrs. Peterson's fork trembled halfway to her mouth. Great Aunt Helen actually gasped, but Brittany's smile never wavered, as if she'd asked me to pass the butter instead of declaring me too old and ugly for her precious memories. That's when I picked up my gift. Not the crystal wine glasses they expected from their financially struggling mother-in-law. The real gift, the one that would have solved every problem they'd ever whispered about during those family dinners where they forgot I had ears. The taxi driver kept glancing at me in his rearview mirror during the 15-minute ride home. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the streetlights into watercolor smears. I suppose it wasn't every day. He picked up a wedding guest, clutching a silver-wrapped box and fleeing before the cake cutting. "Everything okay, ma'am?" he asked as we pulled up to my building. "You sure you don't want to go back?" My reflection stared back from the rain-streaked window. Navy dress, professional hair, styling the kind of effort that had cost me 2 weeks of grocery money. All to be photogenic enough for my son's wedding photos. All wasted on a woman who thought I'd contaminated her perfect day simply by existing. "I'm exactly where I need to be," I told him. Back in my studio apartment, I sat in Harold's old armchair and placed the unopened box on my coffee table. The same coffee table where I'd spread David's homework assignments 20 years ago, where I'd balanced checkbooks and counted pennies and made sacrifices he'd never bothered to notice. Inside that white box, with its silver bow, sat the deed to a $2.8 million oceanfront home and a cashier's check for $3 million, both made out to David and Brittany Williams. My wedding gift that would have erased their mortgage, their student loans, their credit card debt, their whispered arguments about money that I pretended not to hear through thin apartment walls. I'd spent 2 weeks imagining their faces when they opened it. The shock, the gratitude, maybe even tears. Finally, being seen as a blessing instead of a burden. Finally, earning the respect that 36 years of motherhood apparently couldn't purchase on its own. My phone buzzed against the side table. A text from David. "Mom, Brittany said you left early. Are you feeling okay? People are asking where you went. People were asking, not him, not until someone else noticed his mother's absence. I set the phone aside without responding and stared at that pristine white box. Somewhere across town, they were cutting cake and dancing to music I'd helped pay for. Somewhere, Brittany was probably already spinning the story of my departure. Poor Martha, so sensitive, always making things about herself. But 3 weeks ago, everything had changed in ways they couldn't imagine. 3 weeks ago, Murphy's Corner Market had a jackpot worth $62 million. 3 weeks ago, a widow, counting out exact change for soup and saltines, had bought one lottery ticket with her last $5 bill. The winning numbers glowed in my memory: 7, 14, 21, 35, 47. Powerball, 9. $38.4 million after taxes. Enough to buy oceanfront property luxury apartments and the kind of independence I'd never dreamed possible. Enough to transform from grateful mother-in-law to generous benefactor with one incredible gift. I'd planned everything so carefully. The beach house purchased the cashier's check, the wedding present that would have changed their lives forever. All of it wrapped in white paper, with silver ribbon, waiting for the moment when gratitude would finally flow backward from child to parent. Instead, I learned that some people's capacity for cruelty grows in direct proportion to their sense of entitlement. The phone rang at 8:30, David's name on the caller ID. I let it ring 4 times before answering, savoring each electronic chime like a countdown to revelation. "Mom?" His voice carried that strained confusion I'd heard so often when his carefully managed world shifted unexpectedly. "Brittany said you seemed upset about something. She feels terrible. She's worried she did something wrong. She feels terrible. She's worried." But somehow, she'd forgotten to mention the bathroom wall suggestion that had sent me fleeing from my own son's wedding. "Tell Brittany not to worry," I said, my voice steady as surgical steel. "I'm sure she'll understand everything soon enough." 3 weeks earlier, I'd stood in Murphy's Corner Market, counting out exact change, like a woman rationing her last meal. $2.47. That's what remained until my next Social Security check arrived. The wedding was 3 weeks away, and I'd already emptied my savings for a dress I couldn't afford and crystal wine glasses that would probably gather dust in their overcrowded kitchen. The lottery machine hummed in the corner, its digital display flashing $62 million. Tommy Murphy, the same kid who'd bagged groceries since high school, watched me count pennies with the practiced patience of someone who'd witnessed 1,000 small humiliations. "Evening, Mrs. Williams. Lottery machine's working tonight if you're interested. Jackpot's up to 62 million. 62 million. The number felt abstract, meaningless to a woman choosing between soup and saltines for dinner. But something made me pause. Maybe it was remembering last week's family dinner, watching Brittany flash her 3rd designer handbag this month, while I quietly ordered the cheapest item on the menu. Maybe it was David's casual comment about how I should consider downsizing my already tiny apartment, because older people don't need much space. "I'll take 1 ticket," I heard myself say. "Quick pick." The machine spit out a small slip of paper with 6 numbers that would either be meaningless or life-changing: 7, 14, 21, 35, 47. Powerball, 9. That Saturday night, I watched the drawing alone, with tea growing cold in my hands. When those exact numbers appeared on screen, I stared at my crumpled $5 ticket for 10 full minutes, waiting for reality to reassert itself. It never did. $62 million. $38.4 million after taxes. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, won by a woman who walked everywhere to save bus fare. The smart thing would have been to call David immediately to share the incredible news with my only family. Instead, I placed that ticket in my jewelry box next to Harold's wedding ring and began planning the most generous gift in family history. The lottery office looked nothing like I'd imagined. No celebration, no fanfare, just fluorescent lighting and beige walls that suggested bureaucracy rather than dreams coming true. Janet Patterson, the claims officer, processed my paperwork with the same efficiency she'd probably use for a parking permit. After taxes, your lump sum comes to $38.4 million, she said, sliding documents across her desk. I strongly recommend speaking with a financial advisor before making any major purchases. I nodded politely, but my mind was already made up. 4 sleepless nights had crystallized my plans with mathematical precision. My first stop was Henderson Real Estate, where I'd spotted the oceanfront property on Lighthouse Drive during my long walks around town. Beverly Henderson raised her eyebrows when I mentioned my interest. Mrs. Williams, that's a very expensive piece of real estate. The asking price is $2.8 million. I'd like to see it today. I'm a cash buyer. The house was everything I'd dreamed of during those years of penny pinching. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic, 3 bedrooms, wraparound deck where you could watch sunrise, paint the water gold. It had been on the market for 8 months because most buyers needed financing. I'll take it, I said, standing on that deck, listening to waves crash below. Full asking price. Beverly blinked. Don't you want an inspection and appraisal? No need. I want to close as soon as possible. While Beverly processed what she called the fastest sale in company history, I made 3 more stops. Johnson Toyota for a reliable Camry, Miller's Furniture for basic necessities, Pinnacle Bank where I had them prepare a cashier's check for $3 million, payable to David and Brittany Williams. This is quite a large amount, the bank manager said, triple-checking my account balance. Are you certain about this? Absolutely certain. The wedding was still 2 weeks away, but my preparations were complete. Inside that white box with silver ribbon would be the deed to their dream house and enough money to solve every financial problem they'd ever whispered about. I'd transform from struggling mother-in-law to generous benefactor with one incredible moment of revelation. I should have known better than to expect gratitude from people who'd never learned to be grateful. The morning of David's wedding, I woke in my studio apartment with excitement and nervousness I hadn't felt in years. Today, I would transform from the struggling widow who counted pennies to the generous mother who solved all their problems with one incredible gift. The beach house deed and $3 million check sat beautifully wrapped on my kitchen counter like a promise of better family relationships to come. I'd rehearsed this moment for 2 weeks, imagining joy on their faces, tears of gratitude, maybe even an apology from Brittany for her sharper comments about my limited finances. The ceremony was perfect. David looked handsome in his tuxedo, reminding me of his father. Brittany was radiant in her designer gown that cost more than I'd spent on clothes in 3 years. As they exchanged vows, I felt maternal pride mixed with hopeful anticipation. The reception started beautifully. The country club sparkled with white roses and gold accents, live music waiters circulating with champagne. I found my assigned table toward the back, with elderly relatives I barely knew, but I didn't mind. Soon, when they opened presents, everything would change. That's when Brittany approached my table, stunning in her reception, dress picture-perfect smile never wavering. Martha, could I ask you a tiny favor? The photographer wants family photos by the main entrance, and the lighting there is perfect. But could you stand by the bathroom wall instead? With your age and everything, we're trying to keep the photos young and fresh for social media. The words hit like ice water. Around the table, conversation stopped. Mrs. Peterson's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Great Aunt Helen gasped, but Brittany's smile remained perfectly in place. I understand completely, I said, my voice steady, despite humiliation burning in my chest. I stood up, walked to the gift table, and picked up that white box with its silver ribbon. Then, I walked past shocked faces, past the photographer, past my oblivious son adjusting his tie. I walked out, carrying the keys to their dream house and $3 million in cash. For the first time in years, I felt absolutely powerful. The phone calls started that night and haven't stopped since. David's voice carried strained confusion when he called at 8:30. Mom, Brittany said you left early. Are you feeling okay? People were asking where you went. I'm feeling better than I have in years. But you missed everything. The cake, cutting the bouquet toss. I sipped tea in Harold's old chair, that white gift box, sitting unopened on my coffee table. I'm sure they managed without me. Mom, what's going on? You're being weird. Weird. 36 years of raising him, 4 years of being their emergency bank account and expressing slight independence made me weird. David, did your wife explain why I left? Pause. She said you seemed upset about something, but she didn't know what. She feels terrible. She feels terrible. She's worried, but somehow forgot to mention banishing me to the bathroom wall so I wouldn't contaminate their photographs with my advanced age of 64. Tell Brittany not to worry. I'm sure she'll understand everything soon enough. 20 minutes later, Brittany called with honey-sweet, artificial concern. Martha, I'm so sorry if I did something to upset you. Wedding days are crazy. Everything happens so fast. Brittany, did you ask me to stand by the bathroom wall so I wouldn't ruin your photos with my age? Silence. Then nervous laughter. Well, I was trying to arrange family photos, and you thought I was too old and unattractive to be included in your family pictures. That's not. I was just trying to organize things. And the photographer said, the photographer told you to hide the elderly relatives. Another pause. Martha, you're taking this completely wrong. I was trying to be helpful, make sure everyone looked their best. I looked my best tonight, Brittany. I spent money I couldn't afford on a dress shoes professional hairstyling, so I'd be presentable for your special day. Apparently, my best wasn't good enough. Martha, please don't be so sensitive. It was about photo composition, not about you personally. Sensitive. The word that had followed me through 4 years of widowhood every time I'd expressed hurt at their treatment. You're absolutely right, I said calmly. I am being too sensitive. Thank you for the reminder. So you understand, and you'll come to the gift opening tomorrow. We're doing it at our place around noon. The gift opening, where they'd unwrap crystal wine glasses and make polite comments before moving on to more expensive presents from other relatives. I wouldn't miss it. Sunday afternoon, I stood outside their rental house, holding a different gift, a small box containing a key and folded paper. The original white box, with deed in check, was safely locked in my bedroom closet. Their house was full of weekend guests, still buzzing from the celebration. Brittany rushed over as I entered, brilliant smile, completely convincing. Martha, I'm so glad you made it. I hope you know how sorry I am about any misunderstanding yesterday. Think nothing of it, dear. We settled into the living room where gift boxes covered every surface. They took turns opening presents while someone kept a list. Expensive appliances, crystal stemware artwork, the kinds of things young professionals received from well-off families. My crystal wine glasses were received with appropriate enthusiasm. Brittany held them up to the light, praising their quality. Thanks, Mom. These are beautiful. They were beautiful, and they'd cost me 2 weeks of grocery money. Actually, I said, standing up, I have one more gift for you both. I handed over the small box I'd prepared that morning. David looked surprised. Multiple gifts weren't typical given my budget, but opened it eagerly. Inside was a single key attached to a keychain and folded paper. What's this to Mom? It's the key to my new apartment. The address is on the paper. David unfolded it, confusion deepening. Ocean View Towers Unit 4B. Mom, that's the expensive high-rise downtown. How did you? I used some life insurance money Harold left. Money I'd been saving for emergencies. Not technically a lie. Winning the lottery definitely qualified as an emergency. I realized after yesterday that I needed to start thinking about my own future, my own living situation. Brittany's smile was looking strained. That's wonderful, Martha. But why are you giving us the key? Because I want you to see it before I move in next week. 2 bedrooms, ocean views, modern kitchen. I thought you might like to visit sometime. The implications hung in the air. David's expression shifted from confusion to something approaching concern or possibly calculation. Mom, how much did this cost? More than I probably should have spent. But I'm tired of living paycheck to paycheck. I decided I deserve something nice for my golden years. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at each other with an expression I recognized from 4 years of being their personal ATM. The look that calculated what this meant for their financial expectations. So you used all of Dad's life insurance? A significant portion, yes. What I didn't mention was that their emergency bank account had just closed permanently. Moving day arrived with professional movers and my son standing in my new apartment lobby looking like he'd seen a ghost. I hadn't expected him, but there he was at 8 in the morning, holding coffee and wearing the expression of someone solving a puzzle. Mom, we need to talk. Ocean View Towers was everything I'd promised. Luxury high-rise, living with concierge service, and apartments that cost more per month than most people's annual salaries. My 4th-floor unit had floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the harbor granite countertops, enough space for the life I'd always wanted, but never thought I could afford. Nice place, David said, watching movers carry in furniture that clearly hadn't come from my studio apartment. Really nice. Expensive nice. Gone was the struggling widow counting pennies. In her place was a woman who could afford designer furniture and harbor views. I told you I used your father's life insurance money. All of it. David walked to the windows, staring out at water. Mom, Brittany, and I have been talking, and we're worried about you. This seems impulsive. Moving to an expensive place, spending money you've been careful with for years. Worried about me. Rich coming from someone who hadn't called to check if I'd made it home safely after walking out of his wedding. I've never been more sure of anything. But what about your future medical expenses, care needs? I set down my coffee. David, are you concerned about my well-being? Or about what this means for your inheritance? His face flushed. That's not fair. I'm trying to look out for you. The same way you looked out for me at your wedding. That stopped him cold. Neither of us spoke while movers arranged my new leather sofa. Brittany feels terrible about that misunderstanding. I'm sure she does. She really does, Mom. She's been upset all week, worried you hate her. Brittany was upset, but probably not for reasons David thought. More likely, calculating how much money had slipped through their fingers. I don't hate Brittany, David, but I don't intend to spend my remaining years making myself smaller, so other people feel comfortable. He studied my face, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the little boy who used to crawl into my lap during thunderstorms. Then it was gone, replaced by the calculating adult who'd learned his mother was an ATM, not a person. So what happens now? Now I live my life the way I choose. And us, our relationship. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised and sacrificed for and loved unconditionally for 36 years, and felt something shift inside me. Not love dying, but expectations finally being buried. That depends entirely on whether you want a relationship with me or just access to whatever money you think I have left. After he left, I stood at those windows, looking out at a view that cost more per month than I'd previously spent per year, feeling no guilt whatsoever. 2 weeks later, Brittany showed up with homemade cookies and an apology that sounded rehearsed. I let her in, offered coffee, watched her eyes catalog every expensive detail. "Martha, I owe you a huge apology for my behavior at the wedding. I was stressed and said things that came out wrong. The last thing I wanted was to hurt you." She was good. Right amount of regret, tears that looked genuine body language, screaming remorse. "Apology accepted, dear." Relief flooded her face. "I've been sick about it. David said you thought I was calling you old or ugly, and I swear that's not what I meant." "What did you mean?" She leaned forward, picture of earnest sincerity. "I was arranging people by height for photos. Shorter people in one area, taller people by the bathroom wall, because the lighting was better there. Not because of your age." "I see." But she wasn't finished. This was a prepared speech. "The thing is, Martha, I realize my words might have sounded hurtful, even though that wasn't my intention. I consider you family now, real family, which is why David and I would love to have you for dinner this weekend, just the three of us, so we can clear the air. Dinner at their house, where they could pump me for information about my sudden financial upgrade without witnesses." "That's very thoughtful. Saturday night, I'll make that pot roast you complimented at Easter." "I'm afraid I have plans Saturday." Her smile faltered. "Sunday, then. Busy Sunday as well." "Next weekend." "Brittany, I appreciate the invitation, but my calendar is quite full these days." Not entirely true. I spent evenings reading Walking the Harbor Promenade, sitting on my balcony, watching boats. But for the first time in years, my solitude felt like choice rather than abandonment. Full with what? The question slipped out, revealing the real reason for this visit. She wanted to know what I was doing, where I was going, who I was spending time with, and most importantly, who else might have access to whatever money I'd acquired. "Various things. I'm exploring my options." "What kind of options?" I smiled and stood up. "Thank you for the cookies, Brittany." At the door, she turned back. "Martha, you know David loves you. He's worried this rift between us is hurting your relationship with him." "There's no rift, Brittany. There's just clarity." The private investigator's report arrived Tuesday morning, delivered by courier. I'd hired Rebecca Chen the week after Brittany's visit, partly from curiosity, partly self-preservation. The report was thorough. David and Brittany had hired their own investigator to trace my sudden wealth. They'd discovered the apartment car purchase furniture upgrades. What they hadn't found was the lottery ticket or beach house purchase. More interesting were financial details about their situation. Despite comfortable lifestyle, they were living paycheck to paycheck. Credit card debt, student loans, mortgage consuming half of David's income. They'd been counting on my eventual death to solve their problems. Phone calls had started 3 days ago, subtle at first. "Mom, I was wondering if you'd looked into long-term care insurance. Have you updated your will recently?" Brittany's grandmother had a great financial advisor who specializes in retirement planning. Assets beneficiaries, long-term care insurance. They weren't trying to be subtle anymore. This morning's call was David again, voice carrying forced casualness. "Mom, I hate to bring this up, but our investigator friend mentioned someone local might have won the lottery recently. Isn't that crazy? Can you imagine suddenly having all that money?" My coffee paused halfway to my lips. "Investigator friend, Jake Morrison from high school. He's a private investigator now. We were just talking, and he mentioned this lottery thing. Weird coincidence, right? They knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to ask the right questions. Very weird. The thing is, if someone did win that much money, they'd probably want to be careful about who they told. You know how people get when there's cash involved. Friends, family, everyone suddenly needs help. The irony was breathtaking. My own son warning me about family members who might take advantage of lottery winners. That's wise advice, David. So hypothetically, if you knew someone who'd come into money, suddenly, you'd tell them to be careful about who they trust, right? Absolutely. I'd tell them to be especially careful about family members who'd already shown they view them as a source of money rather than a person worthy of respect. Silence. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying that if someone won the lottery, they'd want to make sure their gifts went to people who appreciated them for reasons beyond their bank account balance. Are you Mom? Did you win the lottery? I looked out my harbor windows at the life I'd bought with my winnings, at the beach house deed in my desk drawer, the deed that should have been their wedding present. I think this conversation has gone long enough, David. Mom, wait. I hung up and turned off my phone. Tomorrow was the day I'd been waiting for. Tomorrow, the beach house purchase would be finalized. My preparations complete. Tomorrow, I'd give them exactly what they deserved. The beach house was everything I'd dreamed of. Standing on the wraparound deck at sunrise, watching dolphins play beyond my private beach, I understood why people said money couldn't buy happiness. It couldn't, but it could buy freedom from people who made you unhappy. My phone had buzzed constantly since our last conversation. Calls, texts, voicemails, growing increasingly desperate. Yesterday, Brittany showed up at the downtown apartment. According to the well-compensated doorman, she'd waited 3 hours in the lobby. This morning brought a different approach. The text was a masterpiece of manipulation. Martha David is in the hospital. Please call immediately. I called the hospital directly. No David Williams admitted. No emergency room visits. Nothing. So I called her back. Martha, thank God. David collapsed at work and they rushed him to Springfield General. Brittany, I just called Springfield General. David isn't there. Silence. Then, well, maybe they transferred him. Or maybe I misheard in all the confusion. David isn't in any hospital, Brittany. More silence. We need to talk, Martha. Face to face. There are things you don't understand. Such as the fact that you winning the lottery affects more people than just you. There it was. The mask finally slipping completely. How does my winning affect you, Brittany? Because we're family. Because we've been counting on you, planning around you being part of our financial future. Because David is your only son, and you can't just cut us out because of one stupid comment I made at our wedding. One stupid comment? Yes, one comment that I've apologized for 100 times, and you're acting like I committed some unforgivable sin. It's not fair, Martha. It's not fair to punish us forever because I misspoke one time when I was stressed. I walked to my beach view windows, watching waves crash against rocks that belong to me now. You're right, Brittany. It's not fair to punish you for one comment. Thank you. I knew you'd, which is why I'm not punishing you for the comment. Then what? I'm punishing you for thinking that comment would work, for believing you could humiliate me publicly, then manipulate me privately, for 4 years of treating me like an ATM with legs, for raising my son to believe his mother exists to solve his financial problems, for assuming blood relation gives you rights to my money, but not obligations to treat me with basic human decency. Her voice turned cold, calculating. You know what, Martha? Maybe you're right. Maybe we did take you for granted. But you need us more than we need you. You're a 64-year-old woman with no friends, no life, no family, except us. What are you going to do with all that money? Sit alone in your fancy apartment until you die. I smiled, looking out at my private beach, my infinity pool, my 3-bedroom house that should have been their wedding present. Actually, Brittany, I have plans for the money. Big plans. Plans that were going to include you and David, right up until you asked me to stand by the bathroom wall. What kind of plans? The kind that would have made you very, very happy. But now, you'll never know, will you? The final call came Saturday morning at exactly 9 o'clock. I let it ring 4 times before answering, savoring the moment I'd anticipated for 6 weeks. Mom. David's voice was hollow, defeated. We found out about the beach house. Did you? The private investigator saw the deed transfer. Lighthouse Drive, $2.8 million cash, purchased 6 weeks ago, right after you won the lottery. I poured coffee and walked onto my deck, where morning sun was already warming teak furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Congratulations on your detective work. Mom, please, can we talk? Can we come over? I'm afraid that's not possible. Why not? Because David, you'd have to be invited first. And people who think I'm too old and unattractive for family photographs don't get invited to my home. Mom, that was a mistake. No, David. A mistake is spilling coffee. What happened at your wedding was a choice that revealed exactly how you and your wife view me. So what are you saying? That you're cutting us off completely? That you're going to sit in that house by yourself and pretend we don't exist? They really couldn't imagine a woman my age might have plans beyond serving their needs. Actually, I won't be alone. I'm starting a foundation for elder financial abuse. Apparently, it's more common than I realized. Adult children manipulating parents, treating them like personal banks, isolating them from other relationships, so they're completely dependent on family approval. Silence. I'm also thinking about writing a book about winning the lottery at 64, about relationships that change when money enters the picture, about learning to set boundaries with adult children who've forgotten how to be grateful. Mom, but here's the truly interesting part, David. Want to know what your wedding present was actually going to be? What do you mean? I walked to my desk and pulled out the original gift, the white box with silver ribbon I'd carried out of his reception. I had wrapped up the deed to this house and a cashier's check for $3 million, both made out to David and Brittany Williams. I was going to give you everything. The house, the money, the solution to all your financial problems. I was going to keep just enough for comfortable living and give you the rest. The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. You're lying, he finally whispered. The deed is still made out to both of you. The check is still signed, both sitting in a box, wrapped in white paper with silver ribbon, exactly as they were the night you got married. Yes, Mom, please. I was so excited to see your faces when you opened it. I imagined your joy, your gratitude, maybe even an apology from Brittany for her sharper comments over the years. I spent 2 weeks fantasizing about becoming the generous mother-in-law who solved all your problems with one incredible gift. We can fix this. But instead, your wife decided I was too old and ugly for your precious photographs. And you, David, you stood there and let it happen. I didn't know. You didn't know because you weren't paying attention to your mother. You were paying attention to social media photos and reception timelines and everything except the woman who'd raised you and sacrificed for you and was about to give you everything she had. I could hear crying now. Whether David or Brittany, I couldn't tell. So, here's what's going to happen. I'm keeping the house, the money, and my dignity. You're keeping the crystal wine glasses and the memory of what you chose when you had to pick between treating me with respect and treating me like furniture. Mom, wait. And David, if you're ever ready to have a relationship with me that isn't based on what I can give you financially, you know where to find me. I'll be the old woman sitting on her private beach, living her best life. I hung up and turned off my phone. Then I walked onto my deck, looked out at the Atlantic Ocean stretching endlessly toward the horizon, and smiled. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's getting everything. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.